glasses of beer. I mean, the foam and everything on top of it. And I'm looking at him going, what are you doing? And he looked at the pastor. He said, oh, you didn't tell him? And I looked at the pastor and said, no, I didn't tell him. I said, what, you're going to drink that? Well, to make a long story short, we waited for a while. And of course, she's just drinking it. And then we sat down at the table. Well, it's interesting. Our waiter was not old enough to keep bringing beer to him. He had to go get another waiter to take beer to bring. And I said, I said, so you're drinking something that this kid, by the state of Ohio rules, can't even carry in his hand. And you don't think there's anything wrong with this. He pushed back. He said, all right, you want to fight, man? Let's go ahead and fight. I want to talk. You just give me everything you got. Well, long story short, before that night's over and we're heading back home, Assembly of God pastor's driving, and this guy is laid out in the back seat drunk. But he's talking in tongues, preaching all over America, having great revivals. You know what, folks? It's a scary thought, because about a month or two after that, I was in North Carolina preaching at a Christian school. And it just so happened I was doing a series that week on alcohol. And I was talking about alcohol in Disney movies. You know, and people think, that's kind of stupid. We've got to remember these were kids. Now, so, you think about Dumbo. Dumbo's this little rejected kid with these real big ears, and everybody's making fun of him. He got taken away. He never does have a daddy. He got taken away from his mommy, and everybody's making fun of him. And he's about ready to give up on life, and then all of a sudden, a little mouse comes around. They become buddies. Next thing you know, the clowns are in the tent, and they're all drinking, and happens to be one of them pours over some bottle of wine. It falls down in a little water barrel. Dumbo goes by and he drinks some of it. You all remember the story. Dumbo gets drunk, and that's when he's flying and colors and changes and everything. And that's when the crows come out and said, I've seen a whatever, but I've never seen an elephant fly. You all know the story. Well, of course, I'm showing all this stuff and talking about, I had no idea that this evangelist was sending his son to that school. I had no idea. Well, of course, his son took this tape and brought it home. About a month later, there's a special meeting call. I had to go back to North Carolina. I didn't know what was going on. And this guy was blasting me. What, you false doctrine, lying, all this stuff. Well, make a long story short, guess what? That guy lost his marriage, lost his ministry, and tonight he is an alcoholic. And I'm going to tell you how it starts off. It starts off by people not understanding what the Scripture says about being sober. Now, let's look at this, and I've got just a few minutes here. I need to go over some real quick things. In the Scripture, it talks about a condition for being a bishop, a pastor, an elder, which are all the same terms. It's the true saying, if a man desires the office of a bishop, he desires to... And by the way, this is Bible study night, okay? So can we talk about Bible study stuff tonight, okay? If a man desires the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, and not covetous. Titus, Paul's writing to him and says, and he be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. For a bishop must be blameless, as a steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre. By the way, isn't it funny how the Bible talks about that filthy lucre? You don't hear people, these evangelists getting on TV or these TV preachers getting, you send me 50 filthy lucres this week and I'll send you a sanctified toothpick, You know why their attitude's a lot different, because Peter saw what money did to Judas. And Paul, no doubt, understood how sometimes this whole money issue has destroyed people. And that's why he said, you're going to be a preacher? You're not to be given over that. Call it what it is. It's filthy lucre. but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good man, sober. Now, in both of those passages, both of those texts, not only does it use the word sober, but it uses the phrase not given to wine. Now, if you look this up in the Greek, again, Strong's, it's actually two Greek words, and it means staying near wine. It means being near, from beside, in the vicinity of, and in the proximity with wine. And, it means to be sitting down at a table with wine. That's the picture that's being painted here. Literally what he's saying is that these men are not even to be close to wine, but they're to be an avoider of being in the presence of wine. A pastor is not to be in the presence of wine. It's that simple. Not given to wine. Okay? But then, this is where they got you. Yeah, but John, the other part says, not given to much wine. There you go. So now I can have a little bit of it. Well, now let's just be honest. Okay, let's use a little common sense here, because if that's what that says, then guess what? Then you're right. You can go for it. But let's take a look at this, because something doesn't seem to make sense. All of a sudden I'm going north, and now I'm going south. How'd that happen? Well, let's look at the two passages. It only occurs twice here. And again, it's Paul's letters to Timothy and Titus, these pastors. He says, likewise must the deacons be grave, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre. Titus 2:3, the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. Now, not given to much wine. If you take the common conclusion from these two passages is that it says, when it says not given to much wine, then it must be okay for the use of some wine by deacons and aged women, because that's what it says, right, John? Well, Paul is no more allowing them to drink some wine any more than he's allowing them to use some gossip or some greed. Because it's all connected in the same thing. Now listen to what I'm saying. So let's use a little common sense here for a second. Is Paul setting up a double standard, teaching abstinence for bishops, but moderation for deacons and aged women? Now, you would believe that if you read a lot of the modern translations, because it gives off that impression. Matter of fact, most of the modern translations will translate verse 3 as to say, not addicted to wine. And then, of course, verse 8 saying, not addicted to much wine. Okay? Now, somebody's already caught some problems with that. But does this make logical sense? I mean, let's take a look at these two passages. In New International Version, in Titus 2:3 says, likewise teach older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. New American Standard says not to be enslaved to much wine. Now think about this. The obvious implications of these translations is that while a bishop must have no addiction to wine, whatever, a deacon or an aged woman can be moderately addicted to wine. Okay? There's something wrong with this, folks. Would you say there's something wrong with that? Paul is not setting up a double standard of moral conduct, nor is he stamping his approval on any addiction, moderate or otherwise. Addiction is something which is fundamentally evil and is always morally wrong, whether it's in moderation or excessive. To argue that not addicted to much wine allows a moderate addiction to alcohol is a very serious and dangerous method of interpretation, and only adds to the confusion and the deception that alcohol is playing on Christians today. Is everybody with me? Which, if such an interpretation is true, then it rests on the assumption, folks, now listen to this, that what is forbidden in much is automatically permissible in little. And what is declared wrong in excess is naturally right in moderation. Because there it is moderation in all things. But is this type of thinking, is it rational? Is it true? And is it biblical? I mean, any honest person can see that this method of interpretation is nonsense.